All right, welcome in. What's the spread? Welcome back.
Back at it again.
Mr. Brad Thomas, how are we doing? Today,
good.
I really want to talk about some college football. And what I want to do is I want to do a little twofer. All right, we are getting closer to college football season. Today, we are going to preview the Pac-12. We are also going to preview the Big 12 conference. And right off the bat, just a couple minutes worth here, man. Realignment. It is on the way.
It's happening. It is happening whether people like it or not. I think people are afraid. I wouldn't say I'm excited. I wouldn't say I'm terrified. I think I'm one of those guys where this is not the first time we've seen anything like this. It's not the first time where we've gone from, what was it, like the Big 8 to the Big 12. It's not the first time we've seen things like this.
I think everything is just more magnified now in the age
social
of
media.
Twitter and social media.
Absolutely.
And, the college football playoff and all the publicity that schools like UCF have gotten and, Group of Five versus Power Five. And now we got endorsement deals for college athletes. And, it's going to change the landscape of the sport. There's no doubt about it. This is the first of many moves, and we can get into it more once we have more details. But it's exciting. And the reason I bring it up is because we're talking about the Big 12 today where, a lot of the future is uncertain in that conference, where if we have, two big programs like Oklahoma and Texas moving elsewhere, who knows what that means for the rest.
Flagship programs moving,
right,
which is almost unfathomable to think about.
It's going to force, the Big 10 and the Pac. It's going to force all these other conferences to make moves. It's going to force programs to make moves. It's going to be good for some and not so good for others. But as of right now, we have a clear-cut and clean 2021 college football season.
Yes.
We know what we're working with, and let's get into the Pac-12. Now, with the Pac-12, we all know they didn't have much of a season last year. There wasn't much. I mean, it amounted to Oregon, who didn't even technically belong in the conference title game. It should have been Washington, believe it or not, with a 3-1 record winning that division, but they weren't able to play because of COVID. They get into the title game against USC, who you and I were very high on USC in that game. And Oregon ends up getting the win thanks to Kayvon Thibodeau and that defensive line.
God, man, that D-line just ate them alive. And
they did. And that left an impression on me. And there is something to be said for that, especially when we're talking about what seems to be, based on the odds, what seems to be a expected, what did you say, 5-team race?
Yes.
I mean, we've got Oregon, we've got Washington in the north, and then in the south, we've got USC, Utah,
and Arizona State.
Yes. So let's go ahead and start in the north.
Okay.
Let's start with Oregon and Washington, who we've already talked about these two programs in two early top 25s. And I believe that Oregon and Washington was on one of our lists, at least for top 10 games, or conference games that we're looking forward to. So Oregon to me is still the class of this conference until proven otherwise, especially the fact that they were able to get that conference championship.
That win, it does a lot, especially if you say they didn't deserve to be in. One thing about Oregon that I'm really excited about is they get to be tested early. You think about even there's no game inside of this conference for any of the teams that will test them the way that Ohio State's going to test them.
Yeah,
we'll really see what that front line is really about. Like, I think that we've talked about this, and you guys have heard me express my love for Kayvon Thibodeau, but he's got pieces to match. I think that if you look at all the teams in the Pac-12, you're hard to find an offensive line that's going to be able to handle them. Now you want to talk about USC and how they embarrassed that USC offensive line. For me, I think that when you have a program who is dedicated to getting good talent on the D-line and landing the number one defensive player, and Kayvon Thibodeau is evidence of that, I think that it's going to cause problems because this, to me, is a down year in defensive line and offensive lines in the Pac-12. You look at a lot of teams are replacing top talent on the offensive line. And if you look at how many great players were in the draft on the offensive line from the Pac-12.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, I noticed that in this division, that defense is probably going to rule the game. I mean, and that's really been the case here with this division when you've got teams like Oregon and Washington recruiting high-level talent defensively. But that's the one thing that scares me for Ohio State is that front seven and that defensive line, because all it takes is one good game plan to disrupt the quarterback. And we saw that. Keaton Slovis had nowhere to go.
No.
in that Pac-12 championship game last year. And that is our last impression of the Pac-12. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because in a shortened season, those were the two programs that were able to come out ahead. So you got to think with more preparation, those are going to be the two programs to beat. Now, obviously, there are other teams out there that we're looking at to make some noise that we're going to talk about. But sticking with the North here, Washington. So Oregon is plus 180 to win the conference. Yep. They are the favorite, but not an overwhelming favorite. Washington right behind them at plus 300. We've talked about the Huskies before, but I think this is a little high for them, because I think that Oregon is still so far and above them talent-wise.
I'm excited that you said that too, because you think about it, what does Washington bring to the table? A great defense. I believe they had the number 1 rated defensive team in the Pac-12. But outside of that, averaging a little under 30 points per game is not going to get it done in the Pac-12.
Yeah, they still have no answers on the offensive side. Jimmy Lake, this is his first full season. He's only coached 4 games. I mean, they were 3-1 last year. So that's kind of an unknown, where it's like in this situation, I'm going to go with the team that's been recruiting at a high level with consistency at head coach.
Very well.
So it's interesting to me that Oregon and Washington are so close together. If we're talking about this from a betting perspective, I don't feel comfortable putting a bet down on Washington to win the conference.
There's no way I can do it, especially you don't even know who your starting quarterback day one. And I don't think Morris or I can't even remember the other quarterback, Hurd, are going to be that answer. It's going to be one of those situations where you think about, and this kind of reminds me of like a TCU. This is what it's really starting to be, where you have, you're going to have a good defense, but it's not going to be enough to get you over the hump. The defense is not going to be elite enough in a conference that is known for putting up points. I mean, hell, even if they go up against a UCLA, I think that they're going to lose to a UCLA, because you think about Chip Kelly's offense has gotten better. Dorian Thompson's gotten better every single year, where what are we going to see on offense? And that's also the disadvantage for bettors who have to compare to a COVID-riddled season where we only saw Washington 4 times. So we don't know exactly what we're going to get. It's a lot of for me to say that I'm going to count them out, but I'm going to count them out when I think Oregon is just the class of the North.
And it's rare for us to say that, because we take a lot of stock into, okay, who has the home game this year?
Yes.
And Washington has the home game this year. It's Oregon at Washington. But that's how far and above I think Oregon's program is right now, especially within the division. The South Division race is so much more wide open than the North is right now. So I think that's where we stand. It's a 2-team race in the North. But there are other teams here. I mean, we got California at plus 1,800, Stanford at plus 1,800.
Stanford's okay. I look at Stanford, and every year we want to think that Stanford can, surprise or shock, and
because we like David Shaw.
Yeah, but this team is bad. Defensively, they're god awful, allowing somewhere around 31.5 points per game.
Yeah, and that's not David Shaw's brand of football. And it's surprising that they're coming off a 4-2 record last year, which it seems that the record doesn't indicate where this program is at right now. Whereas Stanford was, when they originally did this Pac-12 alignment, Stanford was supposed to be one of the premier programs in this side. And they haven't lived up to those expectations.
It's one of those feelings where, if you think about the Title IX thing that they had going on at their school, it's one of the things where you think, like, are they really putting money into the football program? Like, Stanford is slowly turning into one of those schools who's more, and this is like kind of off-base statement for me to make, even. I'm going to kind of justify it. But it's like one of those schools who's like, go out there and do your best. Go out there, fill the seats, compete. We are not looking for a national championship. Pac-12 title, if it comes, great. And I don't think that's the type of coach David Shaw is, but that's the program that he's coaching at.
Yeah, I think that they've had a lot of really good seasons in the past, but I don't see that really coming to fruition anymore, especially with the high level of recruiting that's happening over at Oregon. They seem to have a stronghold on this division. But having that said, is Oregon your pick to win the division?
Oregon's my pick to win the division. I do want to go ahead and say, if you want to take a flyer, if you want to take a flyer, my flyer is on Cal.
Yeah,
Cal's improved every year in the last 3 years. I actually said my statement incorrectly earlier, because I totally forgot about Cal. Washington's number 2 in defense in the Pac-12 from last year. Cal's number 1. I mean, it was Chase Gabbers playing quarterback. I think that they have something going, but I don't think they can take that hump. But I mean, at plus 1,800, it's good enough odds for me to take a sprinkle.
I think Cal has the most upside in the division. There's no doubt. Whereas, I also don't want to get away from where I feel like we're like, oh, Washington, but we're still very high on Washington as a program right now, aren't we? Like that, because we've already established that in the past. But I think it was coming from a betting perspective where I didn't understand why they were sitting at plus 300, and then you got Cal over here at plus 1800. It just seems like too much of a disparity there.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into the South. This is where there is, I mean, we got 4 legitimate teams here,
and 4 teams that have progressively gotten better. Like how do you, like, when you think about it, like, how do you have 3 or 4 teams that have gotten better every year? It's exciting. It shows the parity of the South. Really love what Herm Edwards is doing at Arizona State.
Oh, it's incredible, because when Arizona State hired Herm Edwards, I thought it was a really, fun hire, whatever. But what he's done with his program up to this point is really impressive. This was not this was no joke.
Yes.
As a hire. I mean, he's a legitimate college football coach.
Yes. And, people were like, how is Herm, a guy who's past his prime, and I'm saying that not as disrespect, I'm saying what other people were saying.
Right.
A guy who's past his prime, how is he going to recruit at a high level? How is he going to implement things? How is he going to keep up with how the game has changed? He's done a fantastic job. For me, and I'm going to go ahead and say this, I think that we will know after week 2 who is going to be the class of the South. And I think that if USC does not address the offensive line problems they had last year, it's going to be Arizona State. Arizona State has their crossover game versus Washington at home. They play USC and Utah both at home. Those are very, very favorable games for them. Getting Jaden Daniels back too is huge. I like them at plus 350. I hate to say that I'm going against Slavis because I think Slavis has a chance to be a Heisman candidate. But until you can protect your quarterback, you cannot be there with a team who has a favorable schedule. Like, it's almost a level playing field with the advantage going to USC until you have to talk about who has the better schedule.
Yeah, but the fact that Arizona State does play Washington, whereas USC and Utah don't have to play Washington, it's one extra game, but that was kind of a tough draw. But any 3 of these teams here, USC at plus 300, as you mentioned, Arizona State at plus 350, and Utah over here at plus 375, I couldn't argue against, putting a bet down on any of those teams to win the conference, because I think any of those 3 teams have a chance to win this division, which gives you a shot at that title, most likely against Oregon. You mentioned Slavis, and the offensive line is not good.
No.
It's what's holding back this team right now. But here's also
16 sacks last season.
Yeah, bad.
15, something like that.
Yeah. It's a problem. And with this USC program, there is some kind of mental hurdle that they are struggling to get over right now, because we know how talented this team is.
Very talented.
And year in and year out, USC has arguably the best quarterback in the entire conference. And they do have the best quarterback in the entire conference
easily.
This year.
It's not even a competition.
You should be able to turn that into a conference championship year in and year out. In today's college football, the quarterback position is so important. And year in and year out, they have the best quarterback in the conference, and they can't figure it out.
It's wild to me. Good thing for USC, though, is that terrible offensive line, they're all back.
Right. In which... that helps.
Yes.
But there's some kind of mental hurdle that this team has to get over. And they also have to be focused. Who were we saying this about in the ACC? I think it was North Carolina.
Yes.
Don't play down to your opponents. No. USC is classic at playing down to their opponents.
It is bad. And,
these other programs aren't going to do that. So let's talk about Arizona State for a little bit. Jaden Daniels, arguably the second best quarterback.
Yes. And the most fun to watch.
In this conference. Yeah. So Arizona State's got so much upside. I see where the hype's coming from. And then we got Utah. Now, Utah is a program that I never forget about, because Kyle Whittingham is what he does at Utah with what he is given is unreal. I mean, this guy's winning in some years 10, 11 games in this program in a very tough division. And it's because he does it with defense. So where everybody else is, trying to catch up with the Utes at defense, they've already had that.
Utah.
So if they can just find a little bit of rhythm on offense, it could be a game changer.
We look at Utah and we think about their schedule, though. Like, I had to pull it up because I know it's an interesting schedule to look at. Like, tough game. San Diego State, that's not like at San Diego State, that's not a given. At USC, not a given. Like, everywhere on their schedule are tough matchups. At Stanford,
they do get Arizona State at home, which is nice.
They get Arizona State at home.
They get UCLA at home.
They get Oregon at home, which is nice. But it's just like, my God. They play everyone. Who is everyone? The only team they don't play is Washington.
Does Utah play Oregon?
Utah plays Oregon on second to last
well,
week.
that's interesting because can we do some quick math here? USC, they don't play Oregon or Washington, do they?
No.
They don't because
No.
that would have stood out to me. So if we're thinking about this from a scheduling perspective, that's interesting.
They have the
You've got
scheduling
Arizona
leg.
State who gets a crossover game against Washington, and you've got Utah who has a crossover game against Oregon. USC misses Oregon and Washington in the regular season. That's big time.
That's a win.
Yeah,
That's a win.
That's big time. So keep that in mind when betting this division, just because scheduling plays such a big part in that.
What I did remember about USC's schedule, I had to look at it one more time, was the tough games that they play. They get. I mean, their road games are easier road games.
Yes.
Outside of the Arizona State game, which is what you want. Like you want to play like a Utah at home. Like that's something you want. You know, and I think that'll go a long way. So this is what I was saying. We'll know about USC's offensive line in the first game. They play defending champs San Diego State first game. San Diego State hung their hat on their elite defense last year.
Yep.
We'll see. I know it's going to be a step down in competition, but we'll be able to see. They're going to have a little bit of break with Stanford because Stanford's run defense is terrible. So what USC is going to be able to do is they're going to be able to run the ball a lot and establish the run, then throw the ball.
They have a lot of good running back talent.
We'll see what's going to happen there. Check back in with me at week 2. For now, I'm going to take Arizona State. I just think that Herm Edwards is doing something special there. I like their tough games at home. It means a lot. And then listen, after being a Bucs fan for so long, we've had a bad offensive line. We've had great quarterback play. Bad offensive line leads to turnovers, just like it did with Slavis. But, man, if they figure that offensive line out, you could go ahead and bet some money on Slavis to be a Heisman contender and then winning the division in the conference.
Yeah, so and this is the difference for me, whereas I feel way more comfortable putting a bet down Arizona State at plus 350 than I do on Washington at plus 300.
100%.
So, definitely feeling good about an Arizona State bet. If I'm picking a team to win the conference, or even betting because I like plus 300, I'm still going with USC. They won the division last year in a shortened season. I still think they have the best quarterback in the division, but they've got some things to figure out. Really excited to see where it goes from here. But, my man, we got to talk about UCLA.
Let's do this. Yes.
Because this could be a wild card in this division. I really do think that Chip Kelly and UCLA is a complete wild card in this division. At plus 900, you're looking at some serious value here.
Looking at UCLA, when you want to talk about fun, never out of a game.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
UCLA. Their offense is electric. They're adding the Michigan transfer over to their team as well.
Charbonnet, right?
Yeah, Charbonnet.
Running back, yep.
Go ahead.
Well, I just feel like a couple of years ago, we were saying that we weren't seeing any kind of real progression with this program and what Chip Kelly's doing, but now I feel like they have a little bit of momentum. But here's the thing. You got to capitalize on that momentum. It's fine if it takes you a little bit to get off the ground running because UCLA's program wasn't in a great spot when Chip Kelly took over. He didn't have a lot to work with.
10-20 in their first 30 games under Chip Kelly.
Rough. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson could be a difference maker. This is a Chip Kelly kind of quarterback. He's fun. And to your point, the Bruins are never going to be out of a game.
No.
Ever. So they're going to get a couple of big wins in this division, and they are going to be big players against the Utah and the Arizona State and the USC. It's going to be a tough out for any of those teams.
Yes.
So we can't forget about UCLA, and then we got Colorado and Arizona. Colorado's coming off their 4-2 year, but I don't have them
much for them.
I have 4 or 5 wins there,
yeah.
and then Arizona, what was that? Plus 5,000 odds.
Arizona's god awful
in the cellar.
Remember, we were so excited about them and just burned us down for 3 years straight. One thing I do want to say about the South Division, it's kind of funny to think about, is there are going to be a lot of high scoring games because there's a lot of leaky defenses, good offenses, but also high turnover to touchdown teams. It's going to be a lot of fun football to watch.
All right. Conference championship game. You got Oregon and Arizona State.
I do.
What a matchup. Who do you got winning that game?
Oregon. I have my faith in Oregon is so high this year where if it's one of those things where they burn me, they burn me.
So it was a kind of situation where before COVID, I think it was going into 2019 when we were previewing the Pac-12, I didn't see any team separating themselves.
Yeah.
But I think that Oregon is starting to do that as a program where they've just got the brand, they've got the facilities, they got the resources, but they also got the recruiting that's backing it up, the coaching staff that's backing it up. It was still a bit of a head scratcher when Tyler Shove decided to transfer out. But Anthony Brown was and people forget, he was a big player for them down the stretch.
A freaking monster.
Did you see in that conference championship game? It was not Shao doing the work. It was Anthony Brown doing the work. So if he can continue that success on the offensive side of the ball, he's got way more upside in that offense because, Oregon had Herbert obviously before that, but, Brown has that mobile ability and he really just showed a playmaking ability that we hadn't seen in Oregon in a while. So that's another X factor. But here's the thing is that, as I said, this defensive line is so talented.
Yeah.
It's like a Big Ten defensive line or an SEC defensive line.
It's fun.
In the West.
That's what I was saying. Like, when you think about a championship game, it's really hard for me to find an offensive line good enough to stop them consistently. So now they just need to continue to have good play at the quarterback position.
Yeah. So I've got Oregon and USC playing again in the Pac-12 championship game, and I've got Oregon winning that game until USC can figure out their offensive line problems. If USC can get those starters together and build a decent offensive line, as you said, to take on Thibodeau and that defensive line, then I'll give Slavis a shot. But how many interceptions did he throw in that first half last year?
Bro,
3, right?
It was 3. It was freaking gross.
You can't do that.
And they were pressure picks.
Yeah.
That's what
absolutely
was crazy.
So I think that Oregon is the class of this conference. I think they're going to prove it. I don't know if Clay Helton can survive the year, even if they win 10 games. USC is looking for a conference championship at this point. So I don't know if Clay
Especially
Helton...
with a quarterback like Slavic.
Right, exactly. So Helton's got to figure out... he's got to win the conference this year. But until proven otherwise, I think it's Oregon. But on a higher level, Brad, I don't think the Pac-12 has a shot at the playoff this year.
No, I think Oregon is a 2-loss team, and you don't get in with 2 losses.
Yep. So that's that for the Pac-12. Going to be a really fun league to watch. There's no doubt. Brad and myself on our betting Saturdays, we love staying up late watching Pac-12 after dark. But still no chance at the playoff. But I think they're getting there. But I think if they're getting there in the future, it's going to be in Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. The Big 12.
Big 12.
No divisions here. Just 10 teams fighting it out for we don't know for how much longer, right?
Yeah.
We know who the favorite is. Oklahoma is the favorite. -170. I don't know what your thoughts are. I thought they would have been a bigger favorite. I mean, these guys have won the Big 12 6 years in a row.
6 years in a row. Listen, guys, this is going to be an official pick that I put on my Twitter for Brad's Best Bets.
Like it.
I have Oklahoma winning it. I have Oklahoma running the table. I have Oklahoma in the playoffs. I saw somewhere. Listen. I wanted to smack this reporter so bad in the face. They did their predictions, and they had Oklahoma losing that game to Oklahoma State at the end of the year. I wanted to smack them in the face because I already know all Lincoln Riley is thinking about is getting to the national championship game. It doesn't mean anything if you come dressed to the party if you don't get on the dance floor. And the dance floor is the national championship game. Lincoln Riley could win 25 straight Big 12 championships. If he never has a taste of glory in the championship game, his legacy is forever tarnished, and he knows that. The hype is real around a lot of these teams, Iowa State. Heck, I'm going to tell you something crazy about a team that I'm overhyping. Give me Oklahoma -170 all day because I think they should have Clemson odds.
Agreed. Yeah, we'll get into the bottom of the league, but I've got Oklahoma winning the division as well. I don't think it's even close. We can talk about Iowa State too, and I'll just bring them up here. They're sitting here with +280 odds. So is Texas a +280 odds. I think Texas is leaning on Steve Sarkisian and their brand with those +280 odds. No way in hell you're going to get me to put a bet down on them or Iowa State. I wouldn't put a bet down on anybody else in this conference except Oklahoma. You want to talk about talent discrepancy and talent level? The Oklahoma Sooners might be coming in with the best team that Lincoln Riley has ever had. Yep. You've seen how dominant this Oklahoma program has been. I won't talk about the playoff. Let's talk about in the regular season for a minute and getting there. All right. They've been so dominant with all these quarterbacks, but this year, it's the supporting cast that is so damn impressive. Alex Grinch, what he's done on this defense, is changing the league. The Big 12. They're playing defense now.
This defense. And listen, okay, we were talking about alignment. I'm getting a little excited. We were talking about alignment.
Yeah.
And there was a post about Scooter Magruder where he said, where would Oklahoma rank in the East? I said Oklahoma would win the East.
They would win the East every year.
Someone told me that they don't play defense in the Big 12. So I went and looked it up. If Oklahoma were to play in the SEC, they would have the third rated defense in the SEC. I know the comparisons are hard because the competition is different. It's the third rated defense. And so you're saying that you think a team like Georgia, who has the second rated defense, is going to be able to keep up offensively with Oklahoma. Now you're transferring that over to the Big 12. You're taking on teams like Texas, who don't play any defense. Kansas State, who play defense when they maybe want to. Iowa State, who, when they play against a good defense, you're going to have to rely on Brock Purdy to actually stretch the field and throw the ball downfield. We all know Brock Purdy loves his tight ends. I don't think there's a team on paper better than Oklahoma. As long as Spencer Rattler is the quarterback and that defense is stout, there's no way in hot hell that they lose the Big 12. Look at the list of the quarterbacks that are coming out next year. It's Spencer Rattler and everyone else. They're not saying it's Spencer Rattler and Brock Purdy.
And we talked about how this is a season in college football where it's hard to find returning quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler is that quiet returning quarterback that just because he had a slow start in his Oklahoma career.
Yep.
This guy has a chance to be just as good as all the Oklahoma quarterbacks before him.
The only Oklahoma quarterback to actually start multiple seasons since what? Before Baker?
So he's got his second season here, and there's a lot to be said for that. Now, you got Iowa State. There's a lot of hype around these guys. I get it. They're coming off the best season in program history. Iowa State, and I'll just tell you right now, I think that Iowa State makes the conference title game again, but I think they lose to Oklahoma twice. Oklahoma's going to run the table. They don't have a game on their schedule where I even think there's a chance at a loss unless it's just some kind of trip up. But I just think that at this point, as I said, this might be Lincoln Riley's best team. And if you want to talk about the SEC for a second, I think that's interesting. It was only 3 years ago that we had that Oklahoma-Georgia game in the playoff. That was one of the greatest playoff games of all time, where Oklahoma went toe-to-toe with a not-so-good defense.
Yes.
And if you remember, okay, Georgia went into that game with one of the highest-rated defenses in the entire league.
Freaking shredded them apart.
It gave up what, like 45 points?
Yes.
I mean, it was... So, don't give me that, Oklahoma wouldn't survive in the SEC East or the West. It does...
That's a casual statement. Casual
they can
statements
score
like that.
points.
Yes.
In today's college football, it's not about the defense anymore. Defense is not winning you championships. Defense is a supplement to your championship.
Yep.
All right? Georgia is proving that because I am so sick of hearing, and I've had my thoughts on Georgia. I'm high on Georgia this year because I think they have a good offense.
Yes.
But in all those seasons where it was all about their defense, do they have a national championship to show for it, Brad?
No, not single one. And you want to talk about scoring points. Oklahoma has freaking scored over 40 points in 6 straight seasons. Last year they were 4th in offensive rating, and how you want to calculate offensive rating is different. I use the metric, it's offensive production per snap versus per lost possession, which basically means every time they snap the ball, they're more likely to put points on the board than lose possession of the ball. And it's based out of a 100% rating. I think there's something like 87 or 88%. The highest was 90.
Yeah, and that says a lot about the coaching too. Like, you have to think about the coaching pedigree in this conference and how Lincoln Riley is hands down. He's one of the best coaches in the entire country, but what he's doing at Oklahoma, I feel like it's just not talked about enough because yes, they keep tripping up in the playoff, but damn it, they're running into really good teams in the playoff, all right? So they haven't made it. This is not a Notre Dame situation where Notre Dame goes in and gets their ass. Oklahoma has actually been competitive in the playoff, all right? Obviously, they had a poor showing against LSU the last time they were in, but in 2018, they were right there. And as I stated, if they just would have gone past that game, I think that Oklahoma team beats Alabama in the national championship game. I think they were that good that year.
Anyways,
they've been competitive. We don't have to get into that. But what I'm saying is that they've been good enough. This is not a Notre Dame situation where you go in the playoff and you don't belong, and you're not good enough.
We talked about Oklahoma's schedule, so I wanted to break this down.
Yeah.
Listen to how this sets up to play probably your hardest game on the schedule, which you get at home. Bye week at Baylor. So, bye week 2.0. Then you invite Iowa State into your house. That is the best way to set up the second to last game of the season, which is arguably your hardest game on your schedule.
Yeah, so let's talk about that game. Let's talk about Oklahoma State before we get into Texas a little bit, because to your point, I think this Oklahoma schedule it is very favorable.
Yes.
The Texas game, we all know, is neutral site. You get Iowa State at home. They end the season at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State coming in here with plus 900 odds. Don't forget about the Cowboys. Don't forget about Mr. Gundy. This is a very consistent program. And here's the thing. Spencer Sanders is entering his third year.
Yes.
But the question is, can he stay healthy?
Can he stay healthy?
If Oklahoma State gets a healthy season out of Spencer Sanders, it could change the Big 12 race.
It could 100%.
Not to say that I don't think Oklahoma's losing the conference, but I'm just talking about how close this race can be and how meaningful that game can be at the end of the year when they play that game in Stillwater.
The toughest thing for them, though, is that stretch of games that they're going to run into where bye week at Texas, at Iowa State.
Yeah, tough schedule.
Listen, good thing for them, though, with how bad Spencer Sanders gets hurt, is the bye week, they're going to have some time to get healthy. Spencer Sanders only gets hurt because, once again, we run into more offensive line play.
Yeah.
I want to say last year was the lowest point production that Gundy has had his entire career at Oklahoma State. And if it's like third lowest, I'm doing this off the top of my head. So I think it was like the lowest, if I remember correctly. You have to get better quarterback play, regardless of who's under center. I think that, they're going to be in the conversation. They're going to fall a little bit short.
Well, speaking of quarterback play, I want to talk about Texas now, because I know that you're high on somebody at Texas. Talk to me about that. I know you already put a futures bet down.
I have Casey Thompson to win the Heisman. Listen, so you know why I even started looking up these offensive rating numbers? And I literally judged it against 4 different offensive rating scales to see how accurate it was, because I thought Steve Sarkisian was one of the best offensive minds. And what makes a good offensive mind in college football is not just play calling. It's utilizing the weapons that you have. When you have a game where you have Devonta Smith receiving for over 200 yards by halftime, it's not because your quarterback's just that amazing, and it's not because your wide receiver, and yes, they both were great, is that amazing. It's because your offensive coordinator schemed the play calling to put him in opportune positions every single time.
And if you want to see a perfect example of that, just watch the tape back of the national championship game, where I think it was one of the best offensively called games in college football I've ever seen. Because of that point.
Yes.
Where it wasn't about who was distributing the ball, it was about how are you using your playmakers. He's a genius. He's an offensive genius. Can Steve Sarkisian be the guy who can go toe-to-toe with Lincoln Riley? Maybe not this year.
This year.
What if he's the guy that can do that?
I think that, the numbers don't 100% dictate it. Like Casey Thompson only threw for like 250 yards. But the plays that he was making,
size.
Yeah, the plays he was making that one game was great. I think that when you have a offensive play caller who is getting you into that 90% range for offensive efficiency, is you're almost scoring every time you touch the ball. What's really good is their offensive line has gotten 4 starters back, right? Well, guess what? Guess what a young quarterback needs? A safety valve. For Alabama, calling Mac Jones a young quarterback is unfair because he did his time, but a first-year starter. For Alabama, they had the safety valve in early to start the game was Jalen Waddle. Then later in the season, it started to go from Devonta Smith to more of a Najee Harris. Now you get Keelan Robinson, who honestly could play the slot receiver or he could play out in the back. Great. He's going to be utilized a lot. I like that. Only problem I have here is Texas schedule. I don't like Texas schedule because, they have to go at TCU, right? That's going to be a tough game. Well, guess what happens right after TCU? That Oklahoma game where they're going to lose. But I think that they play enough games to put up enough points where there is going to be a serious look on Casey Thompson for the Heisman. And I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I didn't put a little money on Texas to win the national championship.
And Texas, to me, though, what's going to hold them back is their defense. Texas has got to make sure as a program that they do not get left behind where the Big 12 is going right now, which is ironic to say because they're leaving the Big 12 behind. But 32.4 points per game allowed in 2020. And teams like Oklahoma, and you just mentioned TCU, they're more in the 21, 23 points per game range.
Yeah.
Whereas Texas is over here giving up 32 points per game. They cannot be left behind because defense was also something that plagued Tom Herman in big games, where if you look at Tom Herman's tenure at Texas, he did everything right, except in big games, they got burned. They couldn't stop anybody.
Yeah.
Losses to Maryland plagued Tom Herman's tenure. I mean, things like that you can't do. So as good as Sarkisian is on the offensive side of the ball, they can't afford to get left behind there. Not to say that the talent's not there, because they do have talent. They just don't know how to put it together on the field right now. And what I'm saying is, I'm going to give Sark a chance to see if he can be the guy to turn that around. It could be a difference maker. Now, you mentioned you putting a little bit of money on them to win the national championship. Is that because their offense?
It's because that their odds are high enough to where their offense is good enough, they only have to make it to the title game. They don't have to actually win it.
From a betting perspective,
yes.
You're saying if they make it to the title game, then you can hedge it.
Yes.
I gotcha. Well, hey, plus 280 odds here, the same as Iowa State. I feel like we didn't talk about Iowa State enough.
We didn't. You want to talk about Iowa State?
Yeah. Okay. Iowa State. I feel like we've been talking about Brock Purdy for 6 years. Doesn't it feel that way?
Yes.
Has he been starting for 4 years? Or not starting, but he's been playing for 4 years, right?
Starting for 3 years, playing for 4 years.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was going great. Okay, so we got Brock Purdy. Iowa State. This is the one thing that all the big pundits are forgetting about Iowa State. They're not explosive.
No.
They don't make enough explosive plays even in everyday games, but to go into a big game like against an Oklahoma or a Texas or even a TCU, you need explosive plays.
Yes.
And they don't get that from Brock Purdy.
From Brock, check down Purdy. He loves to check the ball. And it's no disrespect. You have.
It's not. It's not disrespect. Because they're still a good team.
They have arguably one of the best tight ends in the country. Of course, I'd want to check it down to them all the time, but I just don't think that Brock Purdy has that, and confidence might not be the right word. He doesn't have that go get it mentality when he plays quarterback. He plays just to play the game. Not like when you think about like a Tua. I'm use Tua as an example. It's kind of unfair, but Tua wants to make a deep pass every time he drops back. Brock Purdy, I think that the play has to be called and designed strictly for deep plays.
And you can look, going back to conference championship weekend, I think it was big last year to have takeaways from that, where Iowa State was never in that game.
No.
There was not 1 second in that game that I thought they had a chance of winning. That says a lot, guys. If you're talking about the championship game, who has legitimately challenged Oklahoma in that Big 12 championship game? Nobody.
No one.
No, it's never been close.
It's always a joke.
Always. Oklahoma, if they slip up in the regular season, they prove it was a fluke, because even if the score doesn't indicate it, if you watch the Big 12 title games, there's never a chance for the opposing team.
Correct.
Oklahoma comes to win a championship, and they get it done. The only thing holding them back from going undefeated every year is that they trip up along the way. I don't think that happens this year, and it sure as hell doesn't happen in the title game. But a team like Iowa State, and there's so much hype around them, and we're trying to talk about this team like they actually have the talent to win the conference. Where I don't think they do.
Are returning players.
That's it.
Like Breece Hall's a great running back, but the reason Breece Hall didn't go to the draft is because he probably would have been like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, not because he was trying to win a national championship. Baloney.
I hope that college football opens up a little bit, but similar to the ACC, where I don't think anybody beats Clemson. We already talked about that. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
You're good.
The Big 12 is similar to me, whereas no one has a chance to beat Oklahoma. Whereas the Pac-12, I can see Oregon getting beat by an Oregon or a Utah or Arizona State or even a Washington. I can see that happening. But this league right now, this is Oklahoma's to lose. We did mention or briefly touched on TCU. They're sitting with plus 1,200 odds.
I had a statement for TCU.
Oh,
too.
sure. Well, I was just going to say we love Gary Patterson on this podcast, and for very good reason. I still think he's one of the best coaches in the country. Very quietly.
TCU, if Max Duggan can play a little bit better,
breakout candidate.
Yes,
at quarterback.
If he can play a little bit better, listen, guys, and I'm the guy who wants to chase long odds. So of course, our official play is going to be Oklahoma, but I will have some personal money on TCU. But for me, for TCU to have to win the conference, Duggan has to play at an elite level. Defense has to be good. and this is going to sound super messed up, but COVID has to come back and there's no fans in the stands. Their away schedule is freaking brutal.
Oh, we got at Oklahoma State, at Iowa State. That's rough.
That's brutal.
But TCU has the defense where they can stay in a game,
yes,
but you've got to find a way to put points on the board.
Winners of 5 of their last 6 games in the season.
And that's Gary Patterson doing Gary Patterson things.
Yep.
Whenever you think this team is counted out, he finds a way to get them back in.
Much like Northwestern making it to the title game, I think that good. TCU has a very good shot of making it to the title game. Someone on this list is a pretender. In this list, we have odds of -170, +280, +280. Of those 3, someone is a pretender. So we're going to already eliminate one person. Now you have to find, is Iowa State or Texas or Oklahoma, are they as real as we say they are?
Well, and then we've got West Virginia. So they're sitting with +1,500. And the reason I bring them up is because they had the #1 scoring defense in the league last year. So you've also got them on the cusp where I don't expect anything out of them because they're losing 5, I would say, bona fide stars from that defense. That was so good last year. So I don't know what kind of turnover they have here. But Neil Brown also has that program where don't forget about them.
And honestly, if you think about West Virginia last year, you could say at least 3 of those losses weren't deserved. They were a couple losses from having a fantastic, and I think, what were they, 6-4 last year? I think 6-4 is a great season for them.
And then just touching on a few other teams here, Kansas State +2,500, lost a lot of talent. Baylor +3,600.
No.
Here's the thing with Baylor, guys. Losing Matt Rule just deflated that program. Now, I'm not saying that Dave Aranda can't turn it around. I think he's a really talented coach.
I don't think he's going to turn it around.
I don't think so either. If I had to make an official prediction or like put a bet down, I'm going to say that Aranda is not going to make it at Baylor. They're in too big of a hole. 2-7 season. His first year was
too much turmoil going on that football team as well, too, with the drama that's happening with the program.
Just really, really bad situation for Baylor. Texas Tech +3,600. That's where Mr. Tyler Shuff transferred, by the way, which I thought was interesting because I didn't see where he went. I'll just full disclosure, had no idea where he went. Saw that, I was like, yeah, that really doesn't change things for me. And then of course we have Kansas.
I do want to say we did talk about Kansas State a little bit. I want to say that probably the most electric duo outside of anything that Oklahoma's bringing is Skylar Thompson and Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn's probably the best back, if you want to say he's better than Breece Hall.
I do think Skylar Thompson, he's got a lot of upside. But just from an overall perspective, the defense didn't play well last year.
They suck. No, I was just saying exciting to watch.
No. For sure. I think. Well, and it's also where we're just looking for upside here, right? So, and then Kansas. I think Kansas wins one game. I think maybe they beat South Dakota, and then that's it. I think they get run off, but.